Hi everybody, this is Dark Guardsman. We're back with part 5 of how to make an item-based battery box. Now, between the episodes, I went ahead and did a little bit of work. This is mostly to clear out some issues that I knew were there, but I didn't get a chance to catch in the previous episodes. First thing first, I did take a look at how we were doing the iterator, and yes, we did make a few mistakes here. First thing is we didn't check to see, make sure why we were looping, that we were inside the limits, so this would infinitely loop until your game would eventually decide it would die. So that was really easy to fix, just had to add a little check. I did move the check that we had down here to its own method, and I did do a few other checks and clean up in here to make sure it works. So the iterator does work. You can see the code here. Of course, the code will be uploaded to the ICBM class repository eventually, so you can just look there if you don't want to sit and watch the video and type everything in. So that does work. There was also some problems getting the render implemented. So the reason why when we placed the block that was invisible the first time, and we couldn't actually see it, was because when we extended block ICBM, this method right here was returning invisible. This is by default. It's the reason why it's a bad idea to use block container, because block container comes with this in it. And the reason it does that is because when you extend it with things like chest doesn't have a render, although chest sets its own thing to entity animated, so it's a little bit pointless, but that's in there, and that does cause problems with rendering. I also went through and implemented the rendering. The rendering was not too big of a deal. I'll probably do another tutorial on this at some point showing how to make render code. Here's what the first half of it looks like, the block state that basically tells it, okay, how we're going to rotate and what our model actually is. And then there's also a model itself that is down here in the blocks, if I can find it, which is this. Right now we're going to be using vanilla textures, not too big of a deal. We've got our particle texture, we've got both the top and bottom set to wood, and then the sides actually set to anvil. We can see this in game. The held item actually does render this way. It does render that. It looks pretty good. Of course, I'm going to change these out to much better textures later on, but it does actually do the job. Another addition that was made is we can now right click and see what the energy is implemented. This was not that big of a change. I was planning on doing it in the last couple episodes, but didn't get a chance to do it. This can be seen in the block battery code. Right down here is that we just grab the energy storage. Now you could use capabilities to get this, so we could use has capability and then get capability, similar to how we do it up here for the item stack, and then do it this way if you want to do for your machine. It's probably a smarter idea. I'm just going to use get storage because I have that method already there, and it does work. Now through testing, I did confirm that this machine does work, so what we're going to do is use an actual addition furnace, which is fully charged. We're going to put this down here. Now, without batteries in it, this thing isn't going to charge up, but what we can do is put batteries in it, and this will slowly start to charge. So you can see we have 3 batteries in there, and it will receive 80 forge energy a tick, is what this puts in there, and it'll keep charging and charging and charging everything else, which is all good. This is exactly what we did in the previous episodes. We got it working, everything's good to go. Now what we need to do is get a GUI up on this tile, so that way we can see our batteries, pull them in and out, and interact with them much easier than just right-clicking. Right-clicking works if you guys want to do that with your models and whatever, and your blocks on your own mod. That's a really cool idea, especially if you do an actual 3D model that would show the batteries installed and give you a much better impression of what's going on. I might do this for another mod in the future and show off the process. But for the moment, we have a pretty bland looking block and we need a GUI on it. So let's go ahead and close down the game and get to work on the GUI. Now, GUIs are not too complicated. A lot of people run away scared from them because they can be a bit intimidating. To make a GUI work, only thing you really need is you need a container and you need a GUI, and then these need to extend some kind of base class that is a GUI. And in my case, I have some prefabs built out, which is container GUI base. This extends GUI container, so you could just extend GUI container, and then you just will not have some of the helper methods I have. The helper methods I have are just really basic things for drawing certain things, like I can draw rectangles, I can draw cubes and stuff. I also use this so I can draw the slots. If you are making a lot of GUIs, I really recommend building yourself a draw slot code, because what this means is you can go into your container, set your slot, and then tell your GUI to render the slot, which is what we're going to actually do for this one. I will do a more vanilla-esque style tutorial in the future. This one's just more meant to give you guys some conceptual concepts that you can end up using. Now for this, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pass in actually the tile in. Let me check really quick. Yeah, we don't store it in here. So this is an older version of the prefab. The 1.7 code has a much nicer version of this. So we want the tiled entity battery box, and then we want the entity player, because we're going to pass these into our container. So our container is going to be, well, let's do the container really quick, make it extend. This would be container base. And container base, it has a generic on it. If you've never seen generics, go read up on them. They're really cool. They're not a solution for everything, but what they let you do is that you can create a little thing right here that's just a single character, and say that extends some kind of object. and then have that so that way this will turn into tile entity battery for our case. So we'll say, okay, H is tile entity battery. And then any method down here, like right here, it will then inherit that, and then we can't make mistakes on what our type is. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll implement the methods it's looking for. So create constructor. The constructor we are looking for is we want this one down here, which is a player in the node. You really do want to pass your tile entity and player into your containers and GUIs if possible. That way you have access to them, and then store them if possible. So in this case, on our super, we actually do store the player, we do store the host, so we have access multiple times. And one of the reasons why we also do this is we keep track of the players that are currently opening GUIs on our tiles. That way we know when we need to do certain behavior, like send packet data to update GUIs and anything else. In our case, we really don't need this, but that functionality is available for us. So if we wanted to draw like an energy bar on the GUI, we do have that ability. I might do a tutorial on that one, but that one will be later. It will not be part of this series. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we just need to return or create new container battery, and then pass in, I believe it was player and then battery. And we need to permeate our arguments here, that way it's the same. Now this is basically, we now have a GUI container. This would work, so if we wanted to open the GUI, it would open up. We would just have nothing on it at this point. In our container, we do need to provide some basic things. So we want to add the player inventory. I'm just going to add the player inventory in the standard location, so it's just going to work. How this works is this just calls a function called add inventory, and it will go through. One, it'll track the players in existence. I don't know why we're tracking it down here in this exact spot, maybe some kind of finicky nature, but it does for loop down here to add the inventory, and it does for loop down here to add the actual slots for the hotbar. You could put these however you want in your GUI. This is just a mimic of the vanilla behavior, so the vanilla behavior just makes it look like this is how you end up with your standard GUI inside the chest and everything else. The chest does do something a little different though. It does actually move it up and down. This is why we have the X and the Y here, so I could do the same exact thing in my GUIs, but by default this is a good position for your GUI or for your player inventory slots as well. You will notice that these will set the slot to the player inventory, so that way the slot itself will work. We're going to do the same exact thing for ours, which is why I'm down in here. I'm going to copy this. Not a good idea to always copy things, but it does make life a little easier. We're going to do a similar for loop. So we're going to go for int I equals 0, I is less than, I believe 5, but at the same time I think we also had a, we had a thing for this, so we can track an exact amount. And then actually let's change this to slot, because if we change the slot then we don't have to actually change a lot of it, and that'll keep track of what slot we're currently on. So we do want to, when you are doing an inventory, when you do make it, one, we need to make sure this is the actual correct object, which should work. And I believe slot, it's looking for inventory, so I'm not sure that would actually work. We do inventory provider. It's interesting that that's not erroring out, because that's not an inventory. I think what we're going to do is do node.getInventory just to make sure it doesn't error out. So you want to pass in your inventory as the first thing, then you're going to want your slot index. In this case, we're just going to pass in slot because that's the exact index we're going to use. Then we just need our position, which is going to be basically this and this. And for our row, we just want to have 18. Actually, I don't even know why. Yeah, we can do 0 here. So we're going to need an X and a Z position. So we're going to do X equals this and Y equals this. That way we can adjust the positioning on this. So that'll feed into that. And this will move our position for the next slot over, I believe, to the right each time you create a new slot. And it'll do that by 18. Each slot's about 18 pixels in size. And this is relative pixels. This is not exact pixels on the screen. So it's just kind of how Minecraft does it. So you judge about how many pixels you're going to be using, and then it'll stretch it to make sure that it fits on the monitor. And then, of course, we want to move it to the Y. And we're going to set this... Take a quick guess. I'm going to say like 50-50 would be a good spot. We're going to adjust this as when we get in the game because it's just guesswork in the moment. But that's all you need for your container. There you go. You got all the slots in there, and that should work. Now with the GUI, we're going to need some draw methods. So we're going to go down in here, and we're going to actually go look at one of the other tiles real quick, just so I make sure I do this the correct way the first time, because there's 3 methods really for drawing. There's draw screen, there's draw foreground, and there's draw background. I think the slots need to be drawn in the background, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so we're definitely going to go check. And let's go down to... I believe the radar station might have a slot on it. Possibility. Actually, the launcher, I believe, has one. It doesn't have any slots. Always one of those assumptions, you're like, hey, you might have a slot on one of these. I think we might be able to get away with drawing on the background. Cruise launcher should have one. Yeah, cruise launcher should definitely have one. Okay, this draws a whole bunch of things. I know I do draw the strings in the foreground, so I'm gonna say we just do the draw background. We're gonna take a guess at this, and we'll do okay. If it breaks, it breaks. If it doesn't, eh. So put this in here. We want to go super.draw GUI background because we're going to want this to make sure it actually does draw our existing background. And these arguments we're passing in, by the way, I believe this is partial ticks is what this is or something, and then these two are your mouse position, so wherever your mouse is on the screen. And it's really useful to keep track of this so you can do like nice graphics if your mouse is over certain spots and everything. Minecraft just does this so that way you can do a few other things. And the reality, we don't actually use that, and you can see it up here where it's actually named properly, so F float. Pretty sure it's partial ticks, and of course these are actually named properly as well. This will draw our background. How it basically works is it gets the container width for us, so make sure we know the size. It binds the texture, resets the color, and then it draws our background from the binded texture. And that works really well. Now what we do is we need to trigger the GUI draw slots. So draw. There should actually be a method for this, and there's not actually a method for it at the moment. So let me see if I can find any usage case of it. And there's not a usage case in here. Luckily, this is pretty easy to do. We just need to go for slot inventory. Yeah, here we go, inventory slots. So that'll give us an array of slots to work with, and we can just call draw a slot on each one of them. And that should draw all of our slots for us. Really, really simple method to do this. It's not really complicated, and it's got a lot of potential to it. It basically goes through and it will draw the slot on the position. I've also got some debug as well, so I can actually see what the slot IDs are. But the position drawing is just X and the Z of or X and the Y of your slot. It'll call down to that. It's got a few different methods it'll call down. So you can actually change the color of it with these methods I've got. And then I have a version of it as well that you can actually draw background things. How this does work is there's a component sheet that has the actual texture of the slot in it, and it'll draw it on the screen several times. For those who are concerned about performance with this, it's not performance hungry. You got to keep in mind you only have one of these open at a time, and I think it will take up to like 100 or so slots before you even notice a small hit on frame rate. And it doesn't really matter too much because frame rate in GUIs is not that big of a deal. As long as you're above, say, 30, the player is okay. Okay, and that should work. And now the last thing, we just need to be able to open this. Now what you would normally do in your own mods is what you would have is in the comment proxy, you would have a get GUI element and get server element, and then you would just return the system you want. I have my own special handlers for this in this mod. I have an IGUI tile, and we're just going to implement the IGUI tile. This saves a bit of work. If you're working on your own mods, I really do recommend using a system like this because it just cuts so much time and effort out of implementing GUIs on your tile and allows you to do really complicated custom interaction with your tiles with a little and minimal effort. Because all you need to do is implement OpenGUI and I believe these two as well. You can also, with my system, you can interact with and change a few other different things. So OpenGUI actually requests a GUI to open. We're not going to toy with that. Actually, we might toy with that. Hold on, let me check to make sure that's called from. Let's call from the multi-block code. We don't have any multi-block code on our system, so yeah, we don't have to worry about it. Because what this does is you do the basic implementation here. So I'll go ahead and copy this just because it would save me a bit of time if I want to implement this in the future. Let me close that, go back to here, and return true. What you could do with this method, of course, is the requested ID would be the ID you want to actually open up. And then this one is get position.x. When you do call OpenGUI on stuff, you do have to pass in the instance of your mod because your GUI handlers are registered to your mod. The ID that you actually want to open up, in this case we're going to do the request ID, which is then it'll just pass back and open up our stuff, the world, and then the position. I'm amazed you don't actually use block positions for this. You actually have to pass in the X, Y, and Z. I think it has to do with how the network code actually works, but I haven't taken too much look into it. That'll work, and then right down here we just want to return new GUI battery, and then we want to pass in the player, and then this. And we do the same thing here. When you do open GUIs, you will have a container server side, and then you will have a GUI client side. The cool thing is you can actually toy around with this and do some pretty interesting things. Like, for example, you could flip to another GUI client side. The container should, in theory, still stay open for you. And you can also open up a GUI only client side without a container being server side if you really wanted to. So there's actual stuff you want to work with here. However, this system is designed for a container and a actual GUI to both exist at the same time, and it does work that way. And this should work pretty well. I think there's a few other systems we want to implement here, like we want to implement iPlayer using if we were doing packet data. We're not going to do packet data at the moment, so we'll take care of that later. But we can open up our GUI here. The only thing we need left to do is actually call the GUI open from the block itself, which is right here. And what we're going to do with this one is we're just going to call tileEntity.openGUI, pass in the player, and then pass in 0 because we only want to open the basic GUI. It wouldn't even matter anyways because it's just going to open regardless. And that should actually work. And we should be able to start this up and have a GUI actually load. That's pretty much simple for the rest of it. If you want to do some special handling, what you could do is come back in here and then restrict these slots to a power battery slot. I don't know if I have a prefab for that at the moment. It would be really simple to make. We might do that after this. We do have... Yes, we do have a slot energy item. Let me go ahead and switch to that. And how that works is what we do is we go energy system, get energy system, cancel support, and it's straightforward. I believe that code is set up. We're going to find out very shortly if that code actually does work. Always with a long load time. You had like 1 or 2 mods in here just for testing, it just blows the load time out. Here we go, block still exists, and of course we're missing the texture on the GUI, but we got the slots almost spot on here. And what I can do is get some batteries. And we should be able to shift in the batteries, I believe. Now, well, we would be able to shift in the batteries if the shift click code was in place, but it looks like the shift click code is not there, and it looks like it will crash. This isn't the actual crash, so this is just it telling me that the actual GUI code is missing, or the actual GUI texture is missing, my bad. So, textures, GUI... Yeah, I think what it's looking for is MC base empty, and it's not actually there. And unfortunately, that's going to crash, I believe. This thing just infinitely copying itself. Yeah, the base looks like the base shift click code is messed up. And it's just infinite looping. So we'll have to fix that at another later date. I'll take care of that in a separate episode. Actually, I'll take care of that outside of the episode. But we'll go ahead and test this again by just putting stuff in. Now we just wait for the game to load again. I made it to phase 2, and then now finishing up. Cool. We're loaded. So what we should be able to do is just do this and click those in, and those should actually exist. So if we right click, those are 2 batteries in there and they are working, so we're good. We're done at this point. I will go ahead and fix the texture at a later point because it's not that big of a deal. And of course implement shift click code and a few other things, and I'll come back with a final demonstration of all the features put together. And hopefully you guys have found some bits of this useful. It's not the greatest tutorial, I know, but we'll get to a point when we're making actual solid, fully thought out tutorials in the future. But I'll see you guys later with more videos.